Maybe first. Hold on.
Okay, welcome guys. We're now starting our live show for OPN.Ninja, and we're pretty excited today. We have an awesome topic with three great guys, and we're going to be talking about getting high in Canada. And I'm just going to pass this over, this nice live feed, so everybody can see each other on Facebook.
Cool.
Nick. Now I'm going to post that. Done. That's pretty cool. All right, now I'm going to jump right into this. So I'm going to give a quick snapshot on OPN, and then we'll go right into the panel. So a little bit about myself. My name is Jeffrey Potvin, and I started OPN about 2-3 months ago. And the whole idea was that we wanted to find ninjas out in the world. And doing that, we had to find all the right people. So we dig into entrepreneurs, C-levels, and people with a lot of stories and experience, and we kind of deep dive in and try to figure out where they came from and where they're going. So on that side of things, I'm going to kick it off, and I think, John, you're going to be the first guy that's going to give us a little snapshot of who you are, where you came from, and then one thing that nobody would know about you, and then we'll kind of go around the horns that way. How's that?
Fantastic. So my name is John Fowler. I was a lawyer here in Toronto before I founded Supreme Pharmaceuticals, where I'm now the CEO. So after about a 10-year career cultivating medical marijuana when I was much younger and made my mother very unhappy, I made her quite happy and went to law school. I actually went and graduated top of my class in Ottawa, got a really good job here on Bay Street, kind of peak happiness, and had a big reprice in the mom index when I told her I was quitting my job to run a marijuana startup, but we're publicly traded. She's a shareholder. She's up 300-400% over the year, so I'm looking quite good going into Christmas. And I guess one thing that most people don't know about me is the first time I smoked marijuana when I was young, I got so stoned I actually thought I was allergic to matches.
Matches?
Oh yeah, if you lit a match around me, I would run in the other direction.
Isn't that moment?
You know that going on for years, right?
I know it now.
That's actually pretty awesome. That's cool. When did you get over your fear of matches?
Pretty much
Never.
Time I tried pop.
Awesome.
That's going to be hard to follow up. I guess it's my turn. So my name is Mike Lickfer. I am still a lawyer. I did not graduate at the top of my class. And I work in the cannabis industry here as a corporate commercial lawyer on Bay Street. And these are some of my clients. Awesome people doing really cool things. So it's very exciting. Former rapper, but other people would know that about me. So the one thing that people wouldn't know about me is that I'm doing this podcast right now.
Fair enough.
They'll know after.
They'll know after, but that's all right. That's all right. It's a start. We'll have to do another one so we can dive deeper on your background, but all right, it's a good start. I like it.
You can still use the same thing again, really.
Sure.
Sure. I'm Alan Gertner. Yes, my journey to here. I have a business degree from Western. I worked at a company called Oliver Wyman as a management consultant in New York for a couple of years. I grew up in Toronto, and all I wanted to do was get the fuck out of Toronto, so I was lucky to get a job in New York. I worked in New York for a couple of years as a management consultant, and then all I wanted to do was get the fuck out of New York. I went to computer camp as a kid. I am a dork. People know that about me, so that's not a revelation. I got a job at Google. I worked in corporate strategy in California for a couple of years. Then I ran a couple $100 million business in Asia for Google in Singapore, Bangkok, and Tokyo. I quit that about 2 years ago. I would say I probably hadn't reached peak happiness at that point. I was struggling to figure out what my next path would be. And I am lucky to have a cool father who's been in the legal marijuana industry for 13 years, I think. And him and I were talking about the wave that was coming and building something in the space. And so we decided to build this business called Tokyo Smoke, ostensibly to be the Grey Goose of the marijuana industry, to build a premium, modern lifestyle brand. In terms of something that people don't know about me, I don't know, I'm overly transparent, I suspect. I don't really like heights, to be honest. You know, I don't really like crowds. I don't really like waiting in line for things. I can just like ream off stuff that would have been on my Tinder profile, but like, that's not that exciting. So I imagine we can try to discover as we go.
No, I like it. That's cool. All right. So I think one of the things that you just mentioned, which is I think the first question that would come to my mind, is that what defines what is actually determined as legal and non-legal marijuana? What is the whole premise behind this? I think there's so many things out there that, 3 or 4 years ago, if I walked down the street smoking a joint or had weed on me, that we'd be suspected that I could be charged for possession or whatever that might be. But I feel now that if I did those same things today, I don't feel that would actually be the case, that it might be just more of a slap on the wrist or, hey, no worries, keep walking your way, kid. And I don't know if that's just because of the way everything is played out, that it doesn't seem to be as big of a deal. And maybe I'm wrong, and I'm just curious as to how you guys see it.
So Mike's going to have the actual explanation really jump in because I like this topic. Cultural norms are not equivalent to law, right? Just because cultural norms evolve and it becomes okay to do something and you're not going to get in trouble, doesn't mean it's not still illegal. So Mike can speak to this better than I can. And this isn't me taking a stance on this one way or another. It is incredible that you can walk around downtown Toronto and smoke a joint and not get in trouble or really have any fear for it for the most part. But that doesn't make it legal.
Depends how big the joint is.
That's true.
That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, that's how cops make the decision.
That's the legal.
They're like, is it like a finger? Right, you've got
throwing darts now. So you do find that
That's true. I think there's a very simple answer to this, and only two ways to get legal marijuana in Canada, and one is you're going to grow it yourself, and one is you're going to buy it from a licensed producer like John, and you need a medical document to do so. So if you're walking down the street and you have a bag of weed on you, and you don't have a medical document that was given to you by a prescribing physician, then you're still illegally possessing narcotics, and you can still be charged with possession.
It's still a crime.
Yeah, and I think to Alan's point, cultural norms are no defense. So going to court and saying, but I do it, every day that ends in a Y and it's never been a problem before, is not going to help you out when you get the one police officer that wants to come out and enforce the letter of the law.
So for the listeners out there, if you want to legally possess and consume medical marijuana, you have to go and you have to get a medical document. You have to either order it online from a licensed producer and it'll ship directly to your house, or you can apply to grow a little bit at home.
And does this follow all the way across Canada, or is this Ontario-based? It doesn't matter.
Across the board.
Okay, fair enough. So I guess the thing where they have the 420 days, I think that's April 20th, where they have it down at Yonge and Dundas Square. Is that sanctioned just for that? Because I know obviously quite a bit happens in that Yonge and Dundas Square at the time. Is that just because the government and the police have kind of quarantined it off in one area where they can do that and it's allowed, or how does that fit into, or is that just a cultural change that's kind of occurring?
About norms versus legality.
Yeah,
it's illegal.
Absolutely, and that varies. So, the Toronto one's very big, it's generally left alone. There are other ones that even as recently as last year have had police enforcement come out and shut it down and threaten to arrest people who show up. So it's very easy to get ahead of ourselves when you live in Toronto or live in Vancouver, where seems to be anything goes for marijuana users these days, but very different story when you start getting into rural Ontario, getting into the prairies, or even getting out east.
So where does this fit in with yourself? So in saying that, there's obviously the legalities to everything. How does your business fit into this whole stream? And you said that you're publicly traded. Is that all because it's all medical marijuana, or how do you guys structure your business in order to kind of break through this government setup, I guess?
Correct. So basically, Supreme and companies like us, so federal licensed producers, we're the only commercial entities legal to produce cannabis for commercial sale currently into the medical marijuana market. So we, also believe that recreational marijuana is coming. We think it's very likely that products for both markets will be produced by the same federal licensees. But regardless, right now we're very happy medical producers. We're able to produce a great product, pass it along to others at a fair price, and do something that is doing a good thing while also making money. And I find the best businesses are ones that do good while being on their path to being successful, and producing a product that is helping folks with whatever it is their doctor has prescribed them for. Just makes you feel good when you go to bed at night.
And are these products that you're building, are they farm field? Are they hydroponics? How do they set up the structure so that, obviously it sounds like you probably have a massive business of needs and wants. Like, how do you fulfill that? Is it you import as well, like, or do you export? Any of that type of stuff occur?
Right now, pretty much all the cannabis in the legal market is grown domestically. It's either grown in traditional greenhouses or indoor warehouses. My company is unique in that we're a hybrid greenhouse grower, so think of an indoor warehouse with 100% skylight. Essentially, we can produce indoor quality buds while being on a greenhouse cost scale and being more sustainable by using less artificial lighting. It's primarily domestically produced. And then particular to our business, we're the only primary wholesaler in the space. So we actually sell that to other licensed producers who will then mark it up and sell it on to their clientele.
Okay. And then Alan, where do you fit into this side of things?
So I mean, very much adjacent to what John does. So with Tokyo Smoke, we wanted to build a brand that has a connection with consumers. Something, again, akin to, as I mentioned before, a Grey Goose, or akin to premium brands in many other spaces. So the way we decided to do that was to build legal retail storefronts. So those are high-end coffee shops and marijuana accessory store. So we don't break the law in these stores. We don't sell weed there, but you can get a glimpse into what a premium marijuana experience is like. Sell beautiful vaporizers, bongs, really great rolling papers. And then we signed a license agreement with one of the legal marijuana growers. So that legal marijuana grower produces Tokyo Smoke branded cannabis. So that's cannabis that aligns to the Tokyo Smoke product. And they then sell that branded cannabis to medical marijuana users in Canada.
So with all this, the different types of stores and I guess everything that's been popping up over the last, it feels like more of the last year or two, where does that position you guys, because you're obviously going for the higher end market where you're bringing more of a social aspect to it, I think bringing more culture, making people feel more comfortable and open about what they're doing so they don't feel like they are per se going in the back of a building or the back lot to smoke something or to buy something that's around it. It's trying to break down those barriers. Do you find that the rest of the competition that's coming in, they're doing it more for the guts and glory of the dollar instead of doing it for the cultural side of it? Or where do you guys see that shift happening?
Yeah, it's hard for me to make assumptions about anyone's motivation. I'm very supportive of legalized marijuana, and I appreciate and value the role that all of the retailers play, whether legal or illegal. And there is some value, there's lots of value in some ways for Canadians having access to medical marijuana and the high visibility of the illegal retail dispensaries. The thing that separates Tokyo Smoke from those companies is that I don't break the law. And I think that if you're going to build a brand that consumers can trust, it's pretty hard to tell an honest and thoughtful story if you're breaking the law. It's like the first step of a relationship. Oh, you start dating somebody and then immediately you're lying to them. It makes it sort of tricky to have a long-term relationship. It makes it sort of tricky to rely on them in good time. And we are very honest and upfront about what we're doing and the journey that we're trying to go on. And I would say a big difference between us and everyone else is, don't break the law. And I have no intention of it.
Have you found while going through this, and maybe this is a question more for Michael, is that do you find that because you're balancing all of these different businesses, that you're spending a lot more time trying to help educate and regulate the legal side of what's going on with people that are trying to get into the business?
I get. If you're getting at, do we get a lot of calls every week about people wanting to open up dispensaries? Yes, we get lots.
I can imagine. Yes.
Dozens, and they just don't understand what the legal landscape is, and it's unfortunate. And I think the media's been a part to blame because there's just a lot of misinformation out there. And so, yeah, but I don't spend time with potential dispensary owners who aren't paying me to educate them. I just tell them very quickly that what they're trying to do is illegal, and that's pretty much the end of the engagement. And the rest of my time is spent with guys like Al and John who are operating the legal framework and need just as much advice on the regulatory side and on all the corporate commercial aspects that go into it as well. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of misinformation out there. A lot of people have gotten very excited about it and they want to enter in one way or another, but they haven't taken the time to actually do the research or even read a few articles on it. So they kind of come misinformed and just want to get in and try and cash in. So
yeah, and we're stating that it's not just that these people are necessarily nefarious operators, right? A lot of it is just a lack of information or a strong desire to support a good cause, which is access to medicine and ultimately legal recreational marijuana. It's not necessarily bad people doing bad things. I think a lot of these people are doing incredible work and are going to end up being seen as critical to this whole movement and have been so far.
So if there was a requirement, and as you mentioned, you can kind of give us maybe a highlight of what those are. Not that I'm going to call you next week and say, hey, I'm thinking about opening a shop, but what are the processes that would help the viewer or help the people listening to understand, you know, it's not as easy as you think? Because I've had friends that have been waiting for licenses for 2 years. I don't even know what that means. Like, is there someone standing there at the government with the door and they're just like, okay, you're next, and then you can go out and do your thing? What is that step process, and is there one, or is it kind of a waiting game and you're in a lineup, some virtual lineup? Like, how is that actually being done?
Well, John's lived this, so through the pain in his eyes, he could probably tell you a little bit about the licensing process about it, and I can fill in the gaps.
Yeah, so basically the licensing process is a very detailed scrutiny by Health Canada to make sure the operators who get into the space, I guess, ought to be there, right? That you're going to be an upstanding operator, you're going to fulfill the duties of your license and all the other corporate requirements. You have to be a good corporate citizen here in Canada. Primarily, they're bucketed in terms of security requirements, both physical security, so, you know, walls, gates, cameras, things like that, personal security. So individual staff members have to get security clearance for key people. Then they want to look at your good production practices, basically making sure you are likely to be able to produce a clean product. I mean, it's not likely to be harmful to the consumer. And then record keeping. And the record keeping primarily is to make sure that they can catch any diversion.
I think to take a step back and get a broader stroke for your listeners or for your friends or for you, we're not looking at, you can't get a license for a retail shop. So when you're submitting to get into a licensed producer position, you're submitting an application to Health Canada to have a licensed commercial facility. So it's not going to look like a retail shop. It's going to look like John has a 300,000 square foot greenhouse, commercial grade facility with bank level vaults, 360-degree cameras all over the place, eyeball scanners, you know, that kind of level of facility. And so that's the most important thing that listeners should be aware of. You're not going to be able to submit an application because you and your friend are really good at growing weed and you want to do it in your basement. So it's they've taken it up to that commercial level. It's easier for Health Canada to regulate large, big players as opposed to 100,000 small players. And that's how the regime was set up in 2013, 2014 when it rolled out. So there are, as John was alluding to, like there are very strict security protocols, there are very strict standard operating procedures that you have to have, and good governance measures, and, you know, a laundry list. And so you're looking at probably, you might disagree, but $500,000 to get a really good application off the ground with a decent sized facility. And obviously there's a lot of variables.
Yeah, I'm just some people think great lawyers like Mike were too cheap to hire in the first place. But the reality is what I'm trying
you
to
have to have the land, right?
It's very complex to get into, and it's a long process. So it took us 3 years to get our cultivation license. You know, it's taken others, you know, call it 2 years plus, I think, on the quickest, and outside of the very early applicants. And the reason for that is it's a lengthy review. I think our application was a few thousand pages, and it all has to be reviewed in detail. And that's all a net positive. So there's a lot of complaints about the delays, if you will. But the reality is, for the long term of the industry, making sure that everybody who gets licensed is a good market participant is in everybody's interest. So if you look at the companies who have been licensed, we're coming up on the 3-year anniversary of the program. You know, we've had no bankruptcies, and we've had no major corporate failings, no big thefts, no big acts of diversion. To me, that's a huge check mark on the government's part for making sure the right companies get in and maintain the credibility of the industry. To Mike's point, is what he was saying is, you know, these are commercial-only mail-order businesses, so there is no storefront component yet. I think everybody, if they want to get into the space and running a multi-million-dollar bulk cultivator is not for them, the time might be now to put money away and start figuring out a business model for if and when there's a possibility for provincial sales licenses. So it's not clear in every province that there's going to be private sale of cannabis. I think a lot of people think in Ontario, for example, we could have LCBO, but I think it's likely, in provinces where you have private liquor stores, there may be an opportunity for new entrants in the space. It should be a lower capital entry point. It should be a faster entry point from time, and it's easier to get transferable skills from retail of something other than cannabis into cannabis retail versus cultivation. And so if I was outside of the space now, I think that's where I'd be looking a way to get myself in. And I think that's the beauty of what Alan's doing, is he figured out how to do that today without waiting for the laws to change tomorrow. For
sure. And how does the because you said you're importing, is the marijuana side, is there, you have to wait for those rules and regulations to change in order to build your own facility here to be able to do that? Or is that something that, I know you have a facility that does certain things, but I'm assuming you're still importing a lot of that product?
No, so as I said, most is grown domestically.
Yeah.
I think the only company to really do import of dried flower for resale would be Bedrocan from their Dutch parent, and even they should stop that after a while. Import really only happens around seeds, so genetic starting materials, and even that's limited. But by far, the vast majority of marijuana that's grown in the legal program is grown here in Canada.
Okay.
I expect that as the market evolves, Canada will be a net exporter of marijuana. We're likely to be the first developed country in the world to have a legal recreational marijuana framework and system, basically have legal pot.
Yep.
Yeah.
But we're seeing that already. So Canada's way ahead. We're, I believe, the only jurisdiction in the world that has real supply chain quality management in terms of detailed quality standards on how we produce. So, for example, Germany right now is in the process of amending their medical program to mirror what we've done here in Canada. So they have some massive changes happening January 1st that are going to put a lot of growth into that market. But they said, look, it's probably 2 to 3 years before they issue domestic cultivation permits in Germany. And the German government actually told licensees, go to Canada and buy some product. So a lot of companies here in Canada have been met by German companies looking to buy for export product. And if you ask them why they're here, they say the government told me to. And I think you're going to see that play out in a lot of places in Europe, Australia, and elsewhere as foreign jurisdictions look to mirror our regulations, and we're a natural partner, whether that's as an exporter or as some sort of strategic partner, because we have a regulatory advantage.
I think stretch the timeline out, we have these big Canadian companies that are very, very good at growing pot and are good at following rules and don't steal that pot. It's reasonable to argue you stretch the timeline out, and pot's going to be to Canada what wine is to France. We have such a lead on crafting great quality product, and we can cultivate that lead, for lack of a better word, and potentially export weed across the world. It's only a matter of time till other countries have, it's really only time till other countries have legal marijuana. You can see it coming. And so if we're already exporting medical product to Germany's, to Brazil's, to Australia's, it's reasonable to look towards a future where we are going to be having a huge export business.
And I think as well, Canadians have a massive advantage in access to capital because we're federally legal. So in the U.S., right, they're still federally illegal. So state operators are still taking federal risk. It's hard to generate large sums of capital. So those markets, even though in aggregate they're quite big, they're actually collections of small and maybe medium-sized businesses at best. Whereas here in Canada, as with most industries, we have a smaller number of larger firms. But I think if you look on the capital markets side, Canada is the mining epicenter of the world for finance, right? Most mines around the world are financed here in Toronto, and quickly we're becoming the same thing for marijuana. So as whether it's exporting our actual product or it's exporting our companies into foreign jurisdictions, I think that money is going to be raised in Toronto, and that capital is what's necessary to support the velocity of growth the companies like mine and guys like Alan are projecting over the next 2, 5, 10, and even 20 years.
No, fair enough. And so you're talking about how distribution can work, importing, exporting in Canada, growing in this space, and it seems quite interesting. They seem quite interested in it as well. So my next thought is, where do the Rothmans and all of these big cigarette producers, where they have the distribution worldwide, they have the facilities, they have the money, they have everything else, where do they fit in this whole ball game? Can they come in and do they decide they're buying the whole thing and they buy the licenses, kind of like how Shoppers developers went out and or submitted for a licensing for this as well because it's pharmaceutical, I guess. So where do these players kind of fit into this space as Canada starts to make a position and move forward?
So I think my view on that is for any big international company, whether it's tobacco, big alcohol, any of this, I think it's going to take a long time to get into it because you got to remember how small Canada is on the global scale. So Canada estimated to be a $7 to $10 billion market. Big for a Canadian company, tiny for Philip Morris or anything like that. So even if they thought they could get 50% market share and add $5 billion to their revenue line, as huge as that is to anything pretty much but a big tobacco or a big alcohol company, that's such a small amount. I don't think they would take the risk. So think about it. They have to start a new business unit. They have to go through compliance. They risk offending their international shareholders that still hold more stigmas around cannabis. I can't see them doing that for $5 billion here in Canada. When you start seeing more jurisdictions legalize, it's a possibility. But by those times, the existing companies and the Canadian companies have been successful are going to be so big and so profitable that it's not going to be a cheap acquisition if it happens.
I'll disagree. The tobacco companies got hot and heavy into e-cigarettes, which are a tiny market. E-cigarettes in the U.S. is a tiny, tiny, tiny market. And they immediately jumped in because they badly, badly, badly need a future, and they badly, badly, badly need a path to growth because the domestic growth is effectively gone, right? Whether it's U.S. domestic growth, Canadian, et cetera. But there's huge potential regulatory risk and health risk. They basically jumped into a product that has no historical testing, and we have no sense of review for. I understand that, but tobacco companies are nothing if not clever and willing to deal with the cumbersome ethical issues that arise along the journey. So it doesn't mean I take your point for sure, John. Listen, we're on a podcast, so I'm disagreeing because why not? Otherwise, it's boring and we just talk to the camera. But I think there's a reasonable possibility that I don't think all of them are going to jump in immediately because hey, they're run by old white dudes and like they probably don't smoke pot and they're probably like ethical risk. But I think there's some chance some of them will be more progressive and jump into the space. They're great at distribution. They're great at marketing. They're good at managing painful regulatory changes. Yeah, could be. I think it'll be a while en masse, but I think we could see them jumping in small ways.
I think pharmaceuticals are jumping quicker.
I think even if it's Canada only, yeah, I think it's very possible.
Would they look at it from, say, for instance, going to one of you guys and saying, hey, why don't we invest in your business to help you grow it? We want you to follow these regulations. Here's the things that we want to do because in 3 years, the market size in Canada, and we can say the US as well, because they now have, I think, 4 states that have approved marijuana distribution. So would they look at it from that perspective and say, you know what, this might be a better way into the market. So we're going to invest in one of you guys, one of your businesses to move this forward quicker.
I don't know enough about tobacco investment strategy, but I'm guessing they buy, not rent. So I'm guessing they wouldn't like put a little bit of money into the businesses. I suspect they would just, it's such a drop in the bucket for them to buy a couple $100 million business.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing they would buy them and sort of run them along Canada, do some experimenting, figure out the market, and be ready when and if it evolves and changes in the US, et cetera, et cetera.
I think we're going to see pharmaceutical companies before we see tobacco companies. Right? There's real medical benefits to this plant. There's real intellectual property around it. There's real patents. There's real clinical trials going on all over the world. The first person to produce a non-synthetic form of this that actually works well and can tackle certain indications is going to be a big winner in the space globally. And the problem, and these guys might disagree, John specifically, but I think one of the biggest problems with the plan is that it's very hard to get repeatable type effects. And so pharmaceuticals will try to curb that and try to create a very repeatable, very mechanical, high CBD type pill for use in certain indications. And that's really hard to do. And once it's done, you might see some of the big giants jump in and swallow up whatever company is the first to do it. So I would say that's going to come before tobacco.
So how does this, and that makes sense. I completely agree that there's probably going to be some strategies that are being built up because like you said, it's a $5 to $10 billion product, but at the end of the day, 5 to 10 billion on a bottom line, learning scalability, take that and drop it into every other country that starts to open up, it starts to expand quite quickly and starts making a lot of money. So one of the things that I found interesting is that with Canada, based on the fact that through NAFTA and all of the other agreements that we have, that if we actually declare or change from medical marijuana, that it can kill a lot of these programs that are set up, which would have to declare, I guess, having us step out of them. Have you found any or heard anything of this? Because I guess
about the international treaties.
Correct.
Like,
yes.
Yeah, I think there's pretty easy ways around that. I mean, you just amend, and if they don't accept your amendment, you just pull out and then come back in with exceptions. So yes, it's something the federal government has to consider, but clearly they've considered it because they've announced legalization, and they're going to announce it and they're going to roll it out. Yeah, at the UN, Canada announced legalizing marijuana for adult use purposes in Canada. So I think
the medical purpose of it, if they try to avoid using the medical purpose, does that not void a lot of...
No, but hold on. Last year, and you got to give it up to the Canadian government, on 420, at the UN, the health minister went, they said, we are going to be legalizing for non-medical use, for recreational use. Okay. So first of all, we haven't seen a big backlash. You know, she wasn't ushered off the stage or anything like that, or any big speeches given in the UN since there. And I think that if you look at it from a practical perspective, you know, a country like Canada, great standing with the UN, legalizing recreational cannabis, which has a surge of support international that grows by the day. You know, I can't see them saying, okay, well, you're going to back out of a treaty and come back in, we're going to put a sanction on you or something like that. There's simply just no support for that. So I think to Mike's point, it's something that has to be considered. There's certain mechanics that have to be dealt with appropriately, but I don't see this as something that has a material impact on our ability to legalize, you know, for domestic purposes here.
Yeah, there have been historic cases where countries have pulled out of treaties and come back into them with certain exceptions that they've built in. So, you know, technically, will we be offside international treaties when we roll this out? Yes, but I think the federal government will figure out a plan to kind of, I'm sure they have a plan to address that on the way back in.
Okay, and to kind of shift a little bit of this to Alan,
Yeah,
where do you see, or have you found that, say, the 4 states of the U.S., are they reaching out to you? Are there, because you're getting a bit more publicity around everything that's going on, is there someone who's teaching other people? Like Amsterdam's been doing this for decades, so we're quite familiar with their style going into a coffee shop. They're pretty old and beat up now. I was just recently there. But they could use a rehaul, I guess, like a little travel, like going to Cuba or something like that in the resort that's been there for 20 years. It's kind of going through that change. So are they learning from you, or are you guys pushing out the model? Is there something where we're now the teachers and this is why Canada's making such a big dent in the market, or how's that working in your eyes?
Yeah, I think Canada is generally seen as a leader. And like I said, we are going to be the first developed country, the first G20 country to have legal pot. And we have the biggest legal pot companies in the world. Like, John, what's the market cap for Supreme?
We're about $250 million. Canopy's over $1 billion. Yeah. There's a number of companies in between. Like, these are real substantial companies.
So, and I think Canada is a de facto leader. In terms of Tokyo Smoke, we've been lucky to get lots of interest from abroad in terms of growing our business and expanding our footprint. We will begin operating in the U.S. very early next year, and similar to our partnership in Canada with the legal marijuana grower, we will have partnerships in multiple states, in addition to stores in multiple states. There seems to be a strong appetite for lifestyle brands in the cannabis space, and we have been lucky to be one of those and be seen as a place that people want to be and be part of.
There's also 8 states now that are legal after the election last week. So
it's 8 now. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Must be a little stunned you're behind a week on your news.
You're just focusing on the Trump part of the election. We were focusing on which states legalize marijuana. Was the only important part.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Including California and Nevada.
I think the flow goes both ways. So I think the U.S. is ahead of us in terms of products. So basically, because their regulations are rather laissez-faire, you can get into concentrates and hash and, you know, edible foods and drinks and all these things which are currently prohibited in Canada. So I think a lot of Canadian companies are looking down there for products they're hoping to one day bring up to Canada. But I think the other way is U.S. companies are looking to Canada for the ability to produce cannabis at a scale that's not done anywhere else in the world. So, a few companies have done deals. Afria most recently is going to work on a 1 million square foot greenhouse in Arizona. It's hard to underestimate the proprietary knowledge that comes from cultivating at a massive scale. In a few years from now, we're going to be producing essentially 6 NFL football fields of marijuana, which is over 1 million plants per year. That's a lot more than taking 1,000 plant grow and doing it 1,000 times in the same place. They're big businesses, and they have a lot to offer to U.S. companies trying to grow as well. And
you find that with this growth strategy, is it, the media, it's pulling everybody from indoors to saying, obviously to being getting out there and being checked for medical purposes so they can get marijuana? Do you find that there's more interest in the product, in everything to do with smoke now than there ever has been, so that in the next 3 years, the market's just going to keep tripling, doubling every year because it's starting to get so much exposure and people, part of a movement, I guess, a cultural movement that everybody wants to be able to be free and make their own choice?
I think it's just worth knowing that a lot of Canadians have always smoked pot. It's not like a new thing. Now we are having this conversation, which is great, right? It's amazing that we're even on a podcast and anyone will listen to this conversation about marijuana. But 22% of Canadians report smoking pot on a regular basis. A quarter of Canadians,
87% of them lie about it.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's say it's a quarter. It's reported. It's surely a low number. A quarter of Canadians drink wine on a regular basis. So we know at the very least, at the bottom end, marijuana is as pervasive as wine. So now we have a narrative. It's very okay for people to be out and talk about it. There are huge businesses in this space. There are very qualified professionals in this space. So you can get out and talk about it, and it's getting more. Yeah, you've got to find this one, right? Yeah, I did point that way, but I pointed towards John.
Might have pointed towards the lobber. Pastry.
Exactly. So I think that's making it a lot more okay to talk about it, talk about something that's a heavy stigma. And the stigma is not yet gone. Like John talked about, there are lots of places in Canada where it's still seen as criminal, and it is criminal. But we're moving in the right direction, and I think the media has taken a generally positive approach to this whole movement and legalization.
Yeah, I will say to your point, though, and just not to play devil's advocate, but just to bring a different perspective, I feel like from a purely medical perspective, as the taboo and the stigma decreases and more doctors are prescribing, there's going to be a lot of people who would have not otherwise tried cannabis, trying cannabis for chronic pain or for other types of indications. I have family members that fit into this category that would have never even considered it. They would have went down the opioid route and are now trying cannabis because the stigma, because everybody's talking about it, because it's becoming more normalized. So in that sense, I think there's found customers, if you will, but on a rec or an adult use level, I think Al's right. I mean, what other industry has been created from regulatory change that has had 100 years of demand in the illegal market, in a sense? I mean, not many that I can think of. So the demand is there. Yep. People are consuming, but on the medical side, it's becoming more normal and more doctors are prescribing, which is great.
And I think if you look at actual grams sold, so who's making up the buying in the market, a lot of those new entrants use a very small amount of cannabis. So my dad's one of them. It took me 10 years to get him to use medical cannabis. He's been using it for about 3-4 months. Hugely successful. He uses a fraction of $1 every day. I think he's costing his legal provider money just on the marketing materials that they send him. So all these new users are great, but the bulk of the industry, the bulk of what's getting consumed on a daily basis, this year, next year, and for the last pretty much ever, a lot of these are high use guys who are using it either daily or weekly, and those people are going to continue to use in the legal market. And I think what's interesting, you talked about market risk, or Mike said it, I don't think there's ever been an industry created with essentially zero market risk. The product is being used and will continue to be used. And for companies like mine or Alan's, it's really about capturing those consumers and offering them a legal option. We're years away from even having to offer them a better option, because we're just getting them to convert from the black market. And I think what's exciting, we often get the analogy that this is like investing in, say, Budweiser at the end of Prohibition. That's a great analogy because people can understand it, but that's actually undersells the market opportunity here by an order of magnitude. The reason being, alcohol was only really illegal in the U.S. and only for 13 years. So when Budweiser came out, they were competing with beer from Europe, whiskey from Scotland, wine from France, and everywhere else around the world. With cannabis, we've got 100 years of global prohibition, and basically Canada is leading the charge. So the Budweisers of cannabis, if you will, the companies being founded today, here in Toronto and across Canada, actually, I would argue, have a bigger market opportunity with less incumbent competition than a company like Budweiser did post-alcohol prohibition in the U.S.
You don't like Budweiser because they're delicious. It's the king of beer.
Beer is a great slogan.
Yeah, it is.
King of Slogan.
You touched on a fascinating piece, but about the doctors, and so with usage comes obviously a skill to be able to determine what things you should use. In a doctor's case, they're prescribing medication every day, which means that somebody's teaching them about which ones are good and bad, what fixes what, and a lot of the time they go to their maybe it's a certain statin or whatever that drug is that they're used to, but they're also getting money on the back end maybe, and that's why they promote it. How do you see that medical marijuana offsetting these medications? And is it able to have that happen?
Sure. I think there's a couple. Yeah, I think you raised a couple different points. I mean, first, doctors have to look at their colleges for guidance. The colleges have unfortunately not been super supportive of marijuana, and I won't get into it because it's a long explanation, but the Coles notes is that medical marijuana and access to it has not come to Canada because because the government wanted it. It came to Canada through court decisions, and that forced the government to provide access to it. So because of that, it's not a Health Canada approved drug, and because of that, the colleges are not super excited about telling their doctors to prescribe it because there haven't been enough clinical trials, there's not enough empirical data, and there's not enough guidance to say this indication requires this amount of cannabis and you're going to smoke it. That's a tough thing for a doctor to get over. So that was the first point. What was the rest of the question?
That was pretty much, I think, what you wanted to get at.
What was the tail end of your question?
Regarding if they're getting dollars on the back end to promote the products, or how
sorry, you were going to say if it's going to displace other drugs, right?
Correct.
Dollars on the back end, that's illegal. Unless, unless there's ways around the Medicine Act, I think it's pretty illegal to pay a doctor to prescribe something. In the awesome 80s, I think you could fly them out places and shoot them a lot of swag, but I think they've tightened up on that a lot. So doctors can't get paid for prescribing. But in terms of displacing other drugs, I think we'll find that it will in the future. You're going to fight pharmaceutical companies on that front, and that's going to be a very tough fight. But they're doing a lot of trials. There's studies in Israel right now that are showing the efficacy of marijuana versus morphine for palliative care, and they're getting some great results. People are less zombified when they're on cannabis as opposed to morphine. Get a better quality of life. They can interact with their next of kin in the late stages of their life, and I think we're going to find out soon that cannabis is way better for chronic pain than opioids are. So that's just going to be a matter of time and a matter of perspective shifting and clinical trials, and pharmaceutical companies are not going to take that lightly, and they are very wealthy. So we'll see how that goes.
And there's a lot of anecdotal evidence. So, we interact with patients daily who give those kind of reports. I'm not a doctor. Science needs to catch up, but even our company was founded because the guy I started the company with, his daughter got fibromyalgia when she was very young. And basically, you'd say, look, it was her mother as well had it. And mom and daughter were either in bed all day taking their opiates, becoming zombies, as Mike said, or they tried to have a day off their pills and they're in bed all day with their pain. When Sarah actually got out to college, she started feeling better. Little did her dad know she was smoking pot at school. And she came home one day and said, hey, Papa, see I'm doing better? He said, yes, I've been smoking marijuana. What do you think? And like any old conservative Austrian guy, he grounded her immediately. But he actually did some more research on it. And a lot of people don't know naturopath medicine actually originated in Austria, so it's kind of historical with Peter's family. So he said to her, look, it's fine, but I want you to show me where it's grown. She said, Dad, I'm scoring dime bags on the college campus. I can't really do that. So he actually went out and got a cultivation license under the old program. So, that's anecdotal. It's not obviously a clinical trial or anything like that, but those stories are stories that we encounter on a daily basis. And it's to the point where there's so much volume. I'm confident the science is going to catch up, because there's no way this is just the biggest placebo effect to happen in medicine.
John was also very shy before he started consuming cannabis. Worked wonders for him.
Well, it's interesting that it sounds like Airbnb disrupting the hotel industry. It's pots disrupting the pharma industry, and I think that that's something that we can't really get away from nowadays. So I think it's a good timing, and it's I think the public's taking it well, obviously from a cultural side.
I'm just going to point out that my cannabis in Toronto is more legal than the Uber taxi or the Airbnb rental hub.
Yep.
Fair enough. That'd be alive.
For sure. So I guess my next, I guess to slowly kind of change gears as we're getting close to time, I wanted to ask is kind of where is it for you guys next? So what's your next plan, Alan, and what do you plan on doing, and what things can people look out for in where you're going with your business?
Yeah, on the whole, I'm really excited for Canada to legalize marijuana. So just as a broad stroke, it should happen reasonably soon, and it's going to be incredible. So that's my hopefully short-term future.
Yeah, late 2017, early 2018. You heard it here first.
You took a very conservative bet. Well done. So for Tokyo Smoke, we will ship we're working with our partner Afria. Tokyo Smoke cannabis will be available to medical patients in January, and then within the first half of the year, Tokyo Smoke branded cannabis will be available in multiple states in the U.S. and hopefully even further abroad. And within that time frame too, I expect us to have a number of additional storefronts. So we're lucky to have a couple stores in Toronto. We should be expanding across Canada and as well within the U.S. And it's a really fun time because I truly believe Canada is leading the way on this front. Although John's point taken, there's lots we can learn on the product side from the U.S. But we have the chance to really establish a lead here, and I'm excited for Tokyo Smoke to bring a high quality product to the rest of the world.
And does Tokyo Smoke go public? Do they stay as is, or?
I have no idea. I want to build a brand and a business that can delight customers and offer them beautiful cannabis experience. And so we'll explore every avenue possible to make sure that we can do that. And if we're able to do it at scale, all the better.
Very cool. I like it. Michael?
Yeah, I mean, the legal profession is pretty static, but as this industry
More
grows,
podcasts?
Yeah, well, we're going to start a competing podcast in the new year, so that's exciting news. So we'll send you the link when our first episode's up, but that's true. We are going to do that, and it's going to focus around the cannabis industry. So that's exciting. On the legal front, look, we grow with our clients. We've been doing this since, I would like to say, day one. It was actually before day one.
You mean that growing in your office with your clients?
Yeah.
Or like at home?
No, both. Both. We grow with our clients. There's only, you have to be able to service your clients. You have to understand their product and their services really, really well. And that's what we pride ourselves on. So whatever it takes. But look, we've been doing this for over 3 years. I knew John when he was an actual lawyer. So it was a real thing that really happened. And, it's been a wild ride, and we're just excited to grow alongside with our clients. And as the industry grows, and every time there's a regulatory change, that's where we come in. Anytime there's activity in the markets, corporate commercial deals, corporate financings, I mean, that we're there. So as the industry grows as a whole, we grow our practice, and it's exciting. So the next thing for us is
there a lot of regulatory changes happening? Like, is it moving pretty quick? Like, a lot of regulatory changes happening, or is it kind of, it's just getting there?
The industry is growing massively, so it's not, on an everyday basis, we're not necessarily dealing with regulatory changes, but as the systems change, the MMPR became the ACMPR in August. There's court cases that have come out that have changed the scope of things, and then we're going to see a rollout of legalization late 2017, early 2018. That's going to be the largest regulatory change, I would argue, in the history of Canada, the history of cannabis in Canada. And so you need lawyers for that. We're recession proof. So we'll be here.
Well, I think
until the bitter end.
Mike's forgetting his pre-marijuana practice. If you go 5 years from the start of the MMPR, so it was 2013 to 2018 when we should have legal marijuana, the amount of regulatory change compared to any other industry in Canada is friggin' massive. So they've even gone through a name of the regulation in like 2 years. They renamed the whole thing, which I actually think is because the Power Rangers movie is coming out. So MMPR SEO is all going to go to Power Rangers. But you know, the amount of change between the Smith decision, the Yard decision. You ever Google MMPR?
Yeah,
Power Rangers.
Mighty Morphin Power
I
Rangers.
never Googled that acronym.
No, you definitely get Mighty Morphin Power Rangers.
So, but if you look at that, we had the implementation of it. We had a transitional period. We had the Allard court case. We had Smith go to the Supreme Court of Canada to add extracts, first as an amendment, now as a roll into the new legislation, and then legalization coming. That is a massive pace of regulatory change, and it's guys like Mike who got to keep companies like us and Alan, on side with all those changes, ideas with what's coming, how to plan our businesses, and how to keep us moving forward.
Very cool. And where do you find yourself going next, John, as a business?
So for us, it's all about cultivation. So we actually launched today, right before your podcast, what we believe to be the biggest financing for cannabis cultivation in the world. It's a $40 million financing. What that allows us to do is build out our entire greenhouse and allow us to get to that 6 football field, kind of million plant a year numbers. And since we're a bulk wholesaler, what we hope it allow us to do is support tons of great brands that are going to come out either existing or in the future. So we're making a bet. There's a lot of guys in Canada, smart like Alan, who see an opportunity to grab a niche, whether it's the Grey Goose or somewhere else in the value line or a different type of consumer. And what we feel like is most of those brands are unlikely to want to cultivate their own cannabis. We think if you look at most industries, they're not vertically integrated. And we also have a great comp here in Canada being the black market, which is also a non-vertically integrated market. You have your big producers, you have your distributors, and you have your retailers. Also, that'd be similar to the US, though that's by law. But basically, that's what we want to do is we want to work with tons of great brands that are coming to the space, help them meet their business goals, help them service their recreational or medical patients, and do well by our company and our shareholders at the same time.
Awesome. Well, I just have to ask one. Well, there's two questions. The last question, the second last question I want to ask is: when I was a kid, my one of our buddies worked for Formosa Springs, and they used to have to test all the beer that came off the line. So he actually was official job was a tester. So do you have the same official jobs inside of your business where you have to test the product, because at the end of the day, it's medical marijuana. You don't know if the person's getting what they're paying for, and you don't want anything bad to happen. Does this get tested, or is it a chemical test? What is it? How do they regulate this so that everybody's going to be fine and happy at the end of the day?
Yeah, we just send it to Mike.
Yeah, it's a simple job, but somebody's got to do it.
I'm surprised you can even talk right now.
Yeah, also an ice cream tester on the side.
Ice cream tester after.
Yeah, exactly. That's always scheduled very well.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
There is product testing, but it's not the type you think. It's at a chemical level to make sure that there's no, pesticides and heavy metals and all that fun stuff.
And then in terms of consumer feedback, there's lots of avenues companies can use to reach out to their consumers and find out if the product's doing what they want, if they're enjoying it, and all that. So just like a traditional business, I guess we should have been in the beer business if we wanted a better job.
Yeah.
I didn't know that direct testers, but not true in medical cannabis. And I don't think many big pharmaceutical companies have in-house narcotics testers either.
No, fair enough. But still fascinating. Could be one hell of a job to have. And I guess the last final question is, what are your guys' thoughts on the U.S. election, and has this affected anything you guys are doing?
So I'll say for Canadian marijuana companies, cultivators here in Canada, curious Alan's thoughts, as a more of an international brand. But for us as a cultivator, I think the election was really a win-win. So what you get is a bunch more states legalizing. I think it's now 1 in 5 Americans are going to live with recreational marijuana, and we must be getting close to half for medical. Is it more than half? There you go, more than half. So what you're going to get is massive top-line news. I mean, people don't recognize yet how big the California market is. If you think Denver or Colorado with 5.5 million people is exciting, Wait till California, which is a country on its own, starts on its own. Cut that off from the U.S. It's the most mature marijuana market in the world. The numbers they're going to put out, the product iteration is going to be fantastic. Well, what's beautiful is that can't come over the federal border, which means that until the U.S. government makes federal legalization, which I feel like is not a top priority in the current administration, Canadian companies have this global market opportunity to build our legal regulated businesses essentially everywhere but the United States. And when the United States does legalize, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road, because they move painfully slow on things, I think Canadian companies are going to be uniquely positioned to dominate even in the US, because we'll be gigantic international companies competing against state-level small businesses. So our ability to either come in and make space for ourselves or acquire operators to bring our businesses down there, I think is going to be something that incumbent US firms in that kind of timeline are going to have trouble competing with.
That was a much more sophisticated answer than I was going to give, so we should just leave it at that. I know for Al, he's a big Trump supporter. The election was great for him. So,
Trump's views on Jews are very positive.
yeah, win-win-win.
They're very supportive.
Yeah.
No, I mean, for me, just from a business perspective, I echo John's sentiments and add one modifier, which is the nice thing for brands now is that we can also play in the U.S. So there's a nice opportunity to both develop at home in Canada and be part of this industry blossoming, and also export our experience, our design, our brand to these burgeoning U.S. markets. California is really the most developed marijuana market in the world right now. Doesn't mean Canada won't surpass it, but incredible things are going to happen there. And I think just for the marijuana movement in general, California is going to declare $1 billion of tax revenue from marijuana somewhere along the journey. And this thing's it really will happen. And this thing's over. I mean, California is a big enough state and will generate enough tax revenue to hit the whole thing. And I'm incredibly excited about that. Not to mention Florida going medical, and that's also unbelievable. It's a huge.
Massachusetts going rec was actually more, phenomenal than anything else that happened.
Both states.
Little state doing something versus the rest, right?
East Coast states.
Yeah, but they were. Yeah, that was a tough one. So exciting. The industry grows, we all win. So
I'm excited. Well, I guess on that note, being that it's exciting and it's our time to kind of pull the plug and move forward, but I want to thank you guys for your time. That was awesome, and I think the information, statistics, details, you guys were awesome in sharing that. I think that there's, if I was to give it a review, I'm going to say that in the next 5 years, Canada is going to make a huge dent in the world market on producing probably the best quality medical and non-medical marijuana. And that there's probably a huge opportunity that if somebody can figure out distribution, operations, all these different key points and ways to interact with society and from a cultural perspective and onwards, I think there's a huge market for someone to be successful. And I think you guys have started to create your own niches, and I think that's pretty amazing. And I wish you guys all the best and keep kicking and knocking down those doors. I was going to say keep kicking ass, so I better finish that thought. But and keep knocking down those doors. I think it's pretty amazing, and I like to see where you guys are going. So maybe we'll touch base in the next, 3, 5, 6 months and see where you guys are at. Maybe I can listen in on your podcast because I think there'll be some valuable information that you guys will be pushing through. And if you do find a tester or you need a tester, you let me know.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
All right, gentlemen, take care. Cheers.
Thank you.
Well, that was pretty exciting and awesome. So just to do a quick review of everything, I think the great thing about the whole medical marijuana build out, it's pretty exciting and pretty interesting on where it fits from a regulation standpoint within Canada and where it's going to go to. As the guys predicted, that in the next 2 to 3 years, by the end of 2018, the 5-year run to make Canada and put them on the map for medical and non-medical marijuana will be there. which is pretty exciting. And I think Alan kind of topped it off by sharing a lot of that information around, you know, where their business is and where their business is going, and building a culture and building up, you know, the premium vodka for the Grey Goose of the world, for being able to bring value to their consumer and making everybody comfortable about what they're doing in this space. And you certainly can't go wrong with John and how they've been able to bolster and really bring this whole side of growing and medical marijuana into the picture that hasn't existed, and certainly doing it by following all the rules and regulations. And I think Michael kind of framed it up nicely by saying that really at the end of the day, everything that goes on in this space is that these guys keep it heavily regulated and legal, that they're not crossing any of the lines, and they're making sure that they're going to be ready for when it does become legalized, and they're positioning themselves now to make sure that they're there in the future. So it was a great conversation and pretty fascinating, and lots of cool details and stats that came out of that. So the 22 and 23% of people that agreed that they smoke, I thought was pretty fascinating. So and it's only going to grow, and people are only going to talk about it more. So I think that we had another great OPN show, and yeah, looking forward to sharing that with everybody. Peace.